topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's wonderful to be here. It's Tuesday morning, and it's always a delight to be, because you have such a beautiful perspective and you share your stories. So I want to invite each and every one of you to continue with the kindness circle, because kindness is something that can transcend any negativity, and kindness also brings love and gratitude. So keep on sharing and spreading it. And for those of you who got our books, Expert to Influencer and the Entrepreneur's Garden, we thank you from our heart, because you're not only helping us help you get transformed, but you're also helping us help the entrepreneurs, because partial profits from the book sales go to kiva.org, where we are helping entrepreneurs all across the globe. So let's bring in our guest. Welcome, Hunter.
Hello, Divya.
So, Hunter, usually we begin from childhood. Do you recall a moment or a person who left a positive mark on you?
Well, I always tell the story of my father. I was born in a relatively poor part of the UK, the Northeast, which was coal mining and iron ore and a lot of unemployment and economic distress. I went to university, luckily enough, and I studied economics. And the economics department was a little bit socialist, a little bit left-wing. And I would absorb all of that. And then my father one day took me to the window of our house. We lived in a rough part of town.
Mm-hmm.
And he pointed out some vagrants on the street. And he said, son, he said, those people think the way that your professors think. They want everybody to be equal, and they'll drag you down to their level in order to get there. And he wasn't an educated man. He was but a very, very hard worker. He was a seaman, and he spent his life at sea, away from home a lot of time. But he was very clear thinking about what was right, about the benefits of hard work, about the climbing up the ladder through your own efforts. So that's my guiding childhood memory.
Very powerful, because that can help you continuously guide you throughout your life. So what was it about economics that drew you?
Well, economics is the science of human thriving. And so an understanding of economics is helpful for bringing benefit at every level, whether you're working in a corporation, whether you're thinking about policy, whether you want to help others all over the world. Economics is the basis of that. It's actually the basis of civilization. The concept of economics is that we're all striving to be better, to create something better, to advance. And that's the genius of consumers, I always say. However brilliant the technology that's delivered to them, they're always going to say, well, I think things could be better. They don't know exactly how, but they have that instinct. So that idea of betterment, everyone striving to get to a better place, comes together in economics, where we all collaborate to do that. and it advances us as a civilization. So at a very high level, economics is civilization. And then at an applied level, it becomes marketing, it becomes engineering, it becomes whatever we apply it to.
Well, that's very powerful and in a very beautiful way that you have captured it, that it is the science of humanity thriving despite the challenges. So tell us about your journey as you completed your college. I know you've been in different companies and you are teaching, you have a very impressive background. So, what was the first stop in your journey?
Well, I was lucky enough after graduating college to join Procter and Gamble in the UK. It's an American company. They had a UK office. And I joined the marketing department, which was a stroke of good fortune. I didn't really understand much about marketing before joining them. But that was another guiding principle that I learned. And Procter and Gamble is a marketing company because they put the customer first. Our CEO used to say the customer is the boss, which is a very, very powerful idea that if we understand customers, they're striving for betterment, which we just talked about, then we can deliver the products and services and get the rewards of the marketplace for doing so. So I was in an area that was marketing soaps and detergents. My boss was mom. So my job was to understand mom as best that I possibly could. So you think of mom running a household. She's the center of a very complex system. She's got to get the kids to school and get them educated, get a husband to work if that's the nature of the household, or she's got to work and balance all the other things going on in the household. She operates a very, very complex system. And if we were to gain her confidence, we had to provide things for that system that would fit in, the things she needs, and improve what she's got right now. So fit in and contribute. So we always thought about that. So detergent makes shirts white, and that makes the laundry smell nice. But what mom gets out of that is a pride of being a good mom, that she can send her kids off to school looking great. Her husband looks well turned out. She herself feels confident about running the home. Now, you got to remember, I'm talking back in the 60s here. That sounds a bit sort of, I don't mean it like that. But my point is to understand the consumer system. That's what I learned. And the core skill there in business is empathy. It's trying to feel or understand how the customer is feeling and turning that into products and services and innovation. So Procter & Gamble back then, and is still a leader in that space, understands that idea of the consumer comes first, empathy for the consumer is the key business skill, and letting the consumer judge is the nature of business. So I took that through a lot of subsequent places in corporate America. I joined a consulting company. I eventually set up my own consulting company to take that kind of insight forward. So we call it branding, building brands. A brand is an intellectual property asset that has the confidence of the customer, the confidence of the consumer. And then one of the interesting places it went was global branding. So we tried to build global brands for our clients that had some consistent merit and appeal and representation worldwide. Other things had to be localized to the local culture, to the local people, to the local markets. And
Absolutely.
We call that.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. What you shared here is that technology changes, things change. And as you mentioned that, what was in 60s, it's a different today for women. But that said, women is usually and it can be men also, but if you were to look at the majority, still women can be at the center of a very complex system. She could be impeccably dressed, as we see in a lot of TV commercials, step out of that minivan with 2.5 kids, and she can cook a fabulous dinner. She can go to work and at the same time help her hapless husband put on the bike chain on that little Bobby's shrimp.
Right.
So things have changed. And so what is looking is that understanding the consumer, that is such a true and time-tested principle. So that is very powerful. Like that when you understand your customer, then you're serving them. It's not about you or your product, it's about customers. So that was a very powerful principle. So as you became a chief marketing officer, and as our audience is listening and viewing, let's we'll explore a couple of examples. Let's say if it was a startup company, how do they need to go about building that global brand?
Well, first is the customer understanding. If
Mhm.
it's B2B, the business customer. If it's B2C, the consumer. So that level of understanding is the difference. It's the way that one company creates an advantage or a superiority over another. Now today we have a lot of data to do that, which is behavioral data. So back in the time when I was talking about Procter & Gamble, we had survey data. We asked people questions, and then we tried to derive decisions from that. But today we've got data-driven decisions, and those are much better because we're looking at actual behavior. What did the customer buy? What did they click on? What did they browse? What are the other things in their life? We know all of that. We have data. And then now we have analytical tools, machine learning, and now AI to turn that into patterns from which we can deduce what that customer feels. They call them avatars now, or
Ideal client avatars, the
yeah,
multiple
exactly.
names
That
for
kind.
it.
Yeah,
Customer journey mapping. Yeah.
yeah, all of that. But it's wonderful because we can understand the behavior of the customers, which reveals their preferences, and we can project those into the future a little bit. And then the second piece is trust, which is a little bit different than it was back in the early days. But digital marketing today has created enormous levels of trust. When you think about Amazon, you click on the button and you trust that the product is as it's described. It's going to be delivered in time. It might be delivered to my door. It might be delivered in 2 hours, but I trust that system. And really, digital marketing today has generated an awful lot of trust. Not the same as social media, which is being distrusted now. So that's a different development. But digital marketing, digital operations, digital delivery has become very trustworthy. And I think that's a great testament to the people who are running businesses. So I'd say understand your customer, develop that trust. And then the uniqueness is not so much in the products because technology advances so fast that everything can be copied. It's in the relationship. It's in the relationship with the customer that continues over time, goes back and forth many times. And the same thing as we always said about brands, you keep your promise. And you keep your promise every time, and you keep it with precision. And that's how you build a company, I think.
Yeah, no, very powerful. Some really great nuggets over there. Now, that said, you definitely talk about capitalism. And a lot of people have this notion that, oh, capitalism is bad and there's a negative connotation to it. So can you take us through the journey as to there used to be a golden age and then there has been a decline, and how can we turn it around?
Yeah, so as you know, I just co-wrote a book called Aberrant Capitalism. I was trying to capture that idea. And it's written from the point of view of being a fan of capitalism. If you look at the objective facts, capitalism has raised the well-being as measured by per capita GDP or any other measure that you care to make worldwide for millions and millions of people over hundreds of years. So writing as a fan of capitalism, we looked at the corporation as the great implementer of capitalist systems. And the golden age you refer to is kind of the second half of the 19th century, the 1800s, and we had great entrepreneurs, individuals who created new products, new distribution systems, new marketing systems to improve people's lives. And my favorite is John D. Rockefeller of Standard Oil. And he's portrayed as one of the robber barons, the exploitative capitalism. And the opposite is true. He talked about kerosene, which was the product that he refined from oil, as the civilizer, the same point I was trying to make earlier, that it brought light to people's homes. It let them play with their kids at night. It let them work later in the barn when that hadn't been possible, that he was advancing civilization. The product got better and better. It got cheaper and cheaper. More and more people could afford it. Before his time, candles were very expensive, and they were afforded in rich homes, but not in poor homes, not in the farmers, not out in the countryside. So here's a great example of a civilizer. So that was an entrepreneurial age. And we talk about many others, the Henry Crowell of Quaker Oats and Richard Sears of Sears Roebuck. But then the entrepreneurs left or died off or were no longer in the companies in the early part of the 20th century. And so it became managerial. And managerial capitalism was positive to begin with. That's when we started to develop brands. The company I talked about, Procter & Gamble, invented brand management in the 1930s. And so those are all positives. But gradually over time, it became controlling, command and control management. And that's the opposite of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is creative, it's exploratory, it's always looking for new things. Command and control is trying to be predictable and steady and cut out all of the variations. So it's not creative, it's the opposite. It became bureaucratic, and so companies became relatively less efficient. It became central planning. And a lot of that happened during the two world wars when we had a war economy and everything was centrally planned. And then in the late 20th century, it became financialization, where the very goal of the corporation to serve customers, make their lives better, became secondary to maximizing shareholder value. So the financial sector, not the private sector, was calling the tunes, was telling companies how they could operate. So we look at the 20th century as kind of this decline. There was still great products made, great advances made, technology advances on its own, irrespective of the corporations. And so capitalism is still positive, but we had this contamination, this entropy, as we call it in the book, through the 20th century. The interesting thing is in the 21st century, we have the opportunity to go back to customer control. The great business models now are directly connected to the customer. The customer's the boss again. And what the customer does directs what the corporations are going to construct and going to develop. And I think that bureaucracy will tend to go away. It'll tend to be automated. The human component, the creativity, the empathy will accelerate. It'll become better because of the data streams that we have. And so I feel very confident about the 21st century from a consumer and customer capitalism standpoint. So we look upon it as the golden age, the descent into managerialism, and now we're rising out of it. That's it in a nutshell.
No, that is very powerful. So here's the thing. As an executive leadership coach, amongst a couple of my other businesses, several of the things have emerged when I am coaching my clients. A lot of my clients still come and say that my bosses are toxic. Now, amongst these bosses, the type of where we talk about the authoritarian leadership, it's including both men and women. And bringing that command and control, like whether it's women to guys, or boys, men leaders to women, or men leaders to men, or whatever it is. Doesn't matter, what the gender is, what the race is, what the mix is. It's something as people progress. A lot of them identify with these titles. And as they identify with the titles, there is a little bit of ego battle coming in, and that ego, because I said so. And so many times what happens is that they are very well liked by the leadership team, and yet they're completely different with their direct reports. So if it's a situation like this, as you talked about, yes, the creativity is coming in, what would be your guidance to people who are in that place?
Well, let me agree with you on the problem first, Divya. I think the product of command and control structures in corporations was this hierarchical management where you have the phenomenon of bosses. It's about people telling other people what to do. And there's a famous poll from Gallup which talks about engagement of people in the workforce. And around the world, 70 to 80% of people are disengaged. They're not happy, they're not committed, they're not putting their energy into the company. And mostly that's because of bad bosses. And so that is a very pervasive problem. It loses a lot of productivity, not just creativity. And so, yes, you're right that it's a problem. And it's a product of that managerialism that we referred to. And it's taught in business schools. I think the concept of leadership as it's taught is quite toxic because exactly what you say, it's about directing, it's about telling people what to do, keeping people inside the lines and so on. The happy development in the modern age is that we can get rid of management. I call it the post-managerial era. And it's replaced by self-management because everybody's smart enough to self-manage. We buy our own cars, we buy our own houses, we buy our own clothes. We don't have people tell us what to do and when we're doing those things. We're all capable of self-management if we have the right information. So in the digital age company, you eliminate all of those hierarchies. The focus is on teams and networks. So I want to be in a team. I want to help other people in my team. The team has a goal. And we'll all do that together. Different people will lead at different times because they've got the relevant knowledge and relevant skills for that moment. But leadership is a floating, distributed kind of a concept. You do away with the structures. The structure becomes non-hierarchical and much more networked. And the digital economy is driving that. Digitalization will drive that because we can automate the bureaucratic parts and turn loose the creative teamwork parts. So I think what you try to do in that situation is drive towards that team structure, that creativity. It's sometimes called entrepreneurship in companies, and constantly strive to take away the rules, the regulations, the limitations, the delays, and focus on development and creativity. It can be done. It's coming from the bottom up, not the top down.
Absolutely. It can definitely be done. And now I want to flip the coin and look at the other side of the story, because there has been tremendous change, because there has been, as we have heard of, resignation. We have heard of the quiet quitting, which is quiet quitting is not quitting the job, but more so of, okay, maybe, I'll just do enough, bare minimum, because my work doesn't interest me. So now when we are taking a look at the post-pandemic corporate structure, so what has happened is that the work-life harmony has really become a part of millennials and Gen Z, where it has the colors of the work-life balance or harmony, whatever we want to call it, has imbued the fabric of their lives. And now as a result, what happens is that when we're talking about moving towards digitization, creativity, teamwork, networks, there are a lot of people who are just doing the bare minimum, and they're more interested in just kind of like doing the work, not looking towards creativity or innovation, but enjoying life itself more. So now in those situations, corporations do need the engagement of employees. How can corporations approach that situation?
Yeah, it's a very sad situation, the way you describe it, Divya. And so let's reject that polarity, the work-life balance. It's just life.
Yeah.
I work and I do other things as well, but it's all part of my life. The lesson I like to look at is the emerging gig economy. So if I'm running a business and I need a skill or a set of experience or some knowledge for a particular application, I'll go onto Upwork and I'll find somebody that I can hire to do that particular job or that particular task. That person is delighted to have that opportunity, and they work really hard and they demonstrate their hyper specialization. And it's a network. I just described a network of two, but obviously it's a lot bigger than that. And great productivity and great joy comes out of that. So there's no reason why we can't do that at the corporate level. Find people's superpowers, their hyper specialized skills, assemble those in the right team on the right task, and turn them loose to do that so that they get joy out of being experts and excellent at what they do. They get joy out of collaboration, and they get joy out of the goal and the purpose of the team. And to use your word, you make sure that that harmonizes with the goals and purposes of the corporation. So this bottom-up hyper specialization, working in teams towards a shared goal with shared meaning for a shared purpose, I think that's entirely possible. And if you get rid of the boss, get rid of the top-down management, get rid of the command and control, it will happen naturally. So, these things take time. Find a company that has those kinds of approaches to doing the job. Sometimes those are highly distributed. They're all over the world. Sometimes there might be local and startups, but they're coming. And it's the younger, smarter companies that are doing that more than the older, kind of stuck in the mud companies.
Absolutely, because the younger generation is all about being entrepreneurial, and they're very much like, especially Gen Z, are self-starters. And yes, they bring their own set of things that most X-Gen and baby boomers don't like, millennials don't like about them. And yet at the same token, if they find that things are not working out for them in the corporate world, they'll go and start a company. And that's very powerful. So I really like what you mentioned about bringing in the right talent. So it's the same thing, whether it's the boss, as you mentioned, so you're looking from both perspectives. So whether it's the leadership, if it is toxic, break it down. And similarly, if it is the talent, and if that is not working out, you need to ensure that you have the right talent in the right structure and who are engaged. Now, you brought in gig economy. Now, are you referring or are you pointing towards that we take away the security of a job security? Like, for example, if somebody signs up, and yes, usually nowadays people don't stay more than 2 to 3 years, but they're getting that 401k and then they're vested in the company. So having gig economy and having that security, how would those two play out?
I think job security is an old-fashioned idea that comes from the industrial era that we talked about. And yes, it's very reassuring if I get the health care and I get the pension. I've been bribed to do that by the corporation to stick around for those benefits, and that's fine. That worked for a long time. But the young people, as you talk about, are much more into individual sovereignty, self-sovereignty. How do I manage my own life? How do I take care of my own future? How do I think about that cash flow and that life stream that I'm embarking upon? And I do believe that they'll take more self-sovereign care of themselves. They might get their benefits from the corporation, or they might buy it from some private company as a service outside the corporation. But I don't think job security, which means I fear getting fired less than I would otherwise, is going to be the sentiment of the future. I think life management is going to be the sentiment of the future. And if I feel like working for a corporation because that gives me some psychic benefits and other kinds of benefits, then I'll do that. If I don't, I'll join my buddies and I'll do a startup, or I'll work on Upwork. I think people will self-manage much more in the future. And as we get more and more digital tools to help us do that, then that will be a greater possibility for everybody.
Absolutely. What you're sharing is Very true. So now let's say there may be a lot of that millennials, like I would say millennials in the early part of their age group. So they are, a lot of them are like, touching 40s, they're having kids, and then they may be saying, now is not the time when I am starting my family and raising my kids to just kind of go out and start a venture. Because as you know, entrepreneurial life is not without being fraught with its own turbulences and trials and tribulations. I've had that question come up several times. What would you say to them?
Well, again, it's self-sovereignty, I think, Divya. The entrepreneurship is a different kind of uncertainty. You contrast it with job security, but it's exploratory, it's experimental. You can't be certain about the future. But I think young people are embracing uncertainty a little bit more. If I'm in my 40s and building a family, maybe I want some of that stability. There are plenty of corporate jobs out there, and there'll be fulfilling corporate jobs for a specialization. So concentrating on what it is that you do best and finding all the tools and the learning and the infrastructure support for that. Even if you're working in a corporation, you need to know how to use ChatGPT and write good queries and all those kinds of things. So keep up with the technology and be valuable. And making yourself valuable, making yourself valued is a benefit that you can cash in as a corporate employee, as a startup, or as a individual contributor. So we focus all the time on value for customers, but making yourself valued is the fulfilling task of the modern generation. How do you implement that is your choice.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That is the common thread that you talked about, that value the customers and also bringing that entrepreneurial mindset. Because when you're bringing that entrepreneurial mindset, what happens is that not only you are able to become familiar with uncertainty and the fear of the unknown, it also helps you to be on that cutting edge where you're constantly learning and making yourself valuable. And when you do that, then you're not just stuck with that one company, because layoffs can happen, as we see that the job security of the previous century is gone. It's what I call sometimes can be an illusion, because yes, there are big companies, and yet we have seen companies like Google and Apple lay off. So we cannot say that just because you're in a job you're going to have certainty. Now, since you brought up the artificial intelligence, let's do a little bit dive into that. Now, what's going to happen is that usually I'm an early adopter. I love to learn. I'm an insatiable lifelong learner. So what used to take maybe days, maybe hours, and a lot of companies, especially marketing agencies, what they would charge for, like, $12,000-$13,000 for something, as you talked about, what is the profile of your ideal customer, how you're going, the hero journey, how you're coming in helping them, what's your unique value proposition, creating website page, landing page, like the whole marketing system now can be done in minutes with artificial intelligence. So what should be the employees as well as the companies look out for to adapt to this inevitable change?
Well, I look upon AI as very much an augmentation of human capacity. As you say, it can make you work faster, it can get you to insights quicker, it can do analysis that you can't do. But if you look at it as augmentation, we have Homo sapiens and we have digital sapiens, if you like. We're both wise, but in different ways. And so I'll give you an example. One of the things that I'm working on is what we call AI tutors. And it's a special case, but there are many of them around, where we have an innovation process that's got certain approaches and methods and so on like that. We can teach the AI the process, And then we can query it for a specific project or specific new development, and it knows the process, knows how to apply it. It can go find the right data. It can get us a response very quickly. But the trick in innovation is iteration. The first construct is never right. There's some gaps in it. How do I find the gaps? How do I fill those gaps? How do I ask a better question next time? A lot of that is human creativity. And so that augmentation of the human plus the AI tutor is one example of how this is going to work. And over time, the tutors may automate a lot of things, especially bureaucratic things, which are step by step and have rules and so on like that. But the imagination, the empathy, the creativity is going to be the human, and the two together will be wonderful. So if I can be skillful at working with an AI in a particular way, then that's a happy future for both of us.
Absolutely. You are so right. So you have shared a lot of wisdom. Now, do share with us, what made you write the book, and where can people find the book? Where can people connect with you?
Well, the main reason for writing the book was some of the survey data that says that young people have a negative opinion of capitalism, which means they don't really know what it is. Less than 40% in a Pew Research poll in 2022 are willing to express a positive sentiment about capitalism, and more had a positive sentiment about socialism, which just goes against the facts. I mean, as I said at the beginning, capitalism has raised the quality of life for billions of people over hundreds of years. So they don't have the facts right. And so I'm trying to explain that it's not capitalism you're mad at, it's corporations. It's the command and control management. It's the financialization, everything that we talked about. And then to point out that in the future, in the digital age, we have a chance of returning to the golden age of capitalism. So I'm trying to write it as a fan of capitalism and an optimistic outlook on the future. So the name of the title of the book is Aberrant Capitalism. It has a subtitle, like The Decay and Revival of Customer Capitalism. So it captures that idea. It's published by Cambridge University Press. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it on their site. And you can find some of the things that I write at a website I run called thevaluecreators.com. And there we have education and these kinds of elements of capitalism. The Value Creators online course, which stresses all these elements of value and empathy and design and so on, and very much the way that I've been talking about. So you can go and see us there or at hunterhastings.com.
Well, fantastic. So you did talk about a lot about the consumers, and then we are coming back to the consumers. Do you have a vision where the corporations, because where they're going, like, where could the corporations go? Where could the CEOs go? Because I know that you were a CEO once upon a time.
Well, I think the concept of digital enablement includes a number of elements. One is that you're directly connected to the customer, as we described. The data is coming into the corporation. You've got tons and tons of data at high speed about what customers are doing. And that should come through the analysis, the data layer, the AI and the machine learning, before it goes anywhere else. So let the AI analyze that, develop the insights, and then distribute it wherever it needs to go. So the company is going to have functions, but not divisions. So if one of my functions is marketing and branding, as we discussed here in this conversation, Divya, all of that data can go into the marketing function. You'll have AIs in there that are marketing tuned. How can I turn this information into useful communication to the customer? But you'll have humans too, who'll direct it to, maybe we prefer this segment over that segment for strategic reasons. You'll have them working together. So marketing and branding generates the orders, the uptake. You'll have operations, which will produce or create the service and deliver it on time. You'll still have a financial component, which is doing the accounting. You're still going to need that. And customer engagement to get the feedback. So those functions will be identifiable, but they're not divisions within the company. Somebody from finance might be working with an AI on marketing to manage the cost and the expenditure and the returns. And somebody from marketing might be working in the operations function to make sure that the customer promise is kept, and so on. So we'll think of a company as less structured, less organized, if you will, because we don't need the bosses, we don't need the top down, and much more self-managed in terms of these autonomous teams, people tied with AIs, and the output decided by the customer. We have this concept, we call it a customer experience environment. The value is what the customer experiences. Are they satisfied with it? And if we can read that through the AI and respond to it by improving it when it's not perfect or elevating it, even if it's good, then that's a responsive environment run by people and the machines that help them. It's not a command and control boss top-down approach. So moving towards that is how I'd advise people.
Yeah, no, definitely. We have talked about a lot of things and a lot of new ideas and new visions for people to think about it and look at their company's framework or even their own entrepreneurial framework and see what applies, what works for you and what would be the best thing for you and what could be the stages from going where you are right now to a vision that could be what you have shared or a vision that you could create, because as we talked about, innovation and creativity is the next destination. So is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap it up?
Well, I just had one point, if I may, Divya, and that is the speed of change. And it can sound like a cliche that the speed of change is accelerating, but it truly, truly is. As we stumble into the AI era and these large language models get more and more data with more and more iterations, our understanding and our insights are going to go faster. Our way of running our companies is going to change faster. So in addition to the entrepreneurial mindset and the creativity that we talked about, the exploration, being comfortable with the speed of change. I think that's a real challenge for human beings. It's less of a challenge for machines. And we've got to become comfortable with that. We're keeping up and ideally keeping ahead. So think about the speed of change and whether you're able to keep up with it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely a very, very relevant point here as we continue with the transition into AI. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom.
Well, thank you very much. It was a great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, wonderful audience, for being part of our show, because without you, the show would not be possible. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your feedback, because you are the heart and soul of the show. And reach out to us. Let us know what are you looking from us. And we are here to serve and support you. And thank you, Juan, for your support, for emotional intelligence, and for being engaged and for being part of the family. So be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.